Emil, thank you very much for coming to Voice of America today. Just last week, Russian publication Vedomosti published an article with some detailed description of a deal between Azerbaijan and Russia on a arms trade for about $1 billion. What does this mean? Just a couple of words about what is this process about and how does this impact Armenia-Russia relations?
Certainly there is a lot of negative reactions within Armenia on the public level. The government has been generally coy to silent about it and making the point that they're not worried about it. Now, I think there's several problems here, though, and probably the biggest problem that I can see is a problem of policy on the part of Armenian government, and that dates back to at least 10 years ago more, where the issue of arms sales to Azerbaijan have not been politicized by Armenia for reasons that I can't understand. Since there's clearly an unresolved conflict, there's a clear intention stated by the government of Azerbaijan to possibly go to war with Armenia. So any arms supplies, especially heavy artillery, long-range artillery, aviation, things that can have impact in the fighting, should be on a priority list in terms of Armenian government trying to prevent such supplies going to Azerbaijan. Prior to Russia resuming a relationship of weapon sales to Azerbaijan, which has been about 5 years, most of the weapons were coming to Azerbaijan from Ukraine and Israel and to a lesser extent Turkey. There have been no protests by Armenian government, public protests, neither with Ukraine nor with Israel, and there have been protests now with Russia. Now, I can't understand it because even though certainly there are, reasons why Russia thinks it should be selling weapons to Azerbaijan, as far as Armenia is concerned, it needs to do something to raise the political price of such deals with Azerbaijan. By not raising the political price with previous deals, it basically signed off on the future deals, which is what we're having right now. Now, with the specific case of Russia, obviously Armenians have a particular attitude towards Russia and the relationship, the strategic relationship that's declared, the commitments that Russia has to defend Armenia in a potential war. The argumentation runs in the sense that, look, you're not the country that should be assisting our potential enemy, and on the Russian side is, oh, you know what, these guys are going to buy weapons one way or another. It's better for us to sell them, for them to be dependent on us, because the weapon sales primarily is a politically driven, on the political level, politically driven thing, binding countries together. Yeah, the commercial element is there for sure, and they can say, oh well, we're selling them the weapons, and then we use that money to be able to subsidize our sales to you. So you're benefiting from this as well. But
has this been publicly declared?
Not by the government, of course.
Right. Because what we saw is the head of CSTO, the current chair of CSTO, and a Russian official in Yerevan last week announced that this sales is to maintain balance. I mean, at least the public argument from the officials is about the balance rather than selling, making money, and subsidizing the weapons to Armenia.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of different conversations happening. One thing that this also reflects is that the relationship that Armenia and Russia have today is not, it's probably never been, but it's not very healthy on the leadership level. We've, had certain developments over the last year with regard to Russia pushing for the customs union, the Eurasian Union, Armenia being very aloof of that. President sort of making the point of skipping certain summits, trying to push for the association agreement with the European Union. I'm sure there is some tension on the leadership level there, where had there not been there, this deal might not have gone through at this point.
So you're talking Sarkisian, Putin specifically?
Yes. From the reports that I've seen, and prior reports, prior to Vedomosti report, was that this deal was made 2 years ago, 3 years ago. There's various aspects to this deal. But the Russians would not supply the weapons at the time. Now they've actually physically come in within weeks of the military parade. So, there was this sense that Russia wanted to help Azerbaijan, with this show of force. Realistically, what does it mean for military technical situation in Karabakh? There are reports that Russia had sold long-range multiple rocket launch systems. Those are the most problematic probably out of the entire package reported because they're destructive, they're long distance. Azerbaijan has had those systems since 2003, 2004. They bought a bunch in Ukraine. They've also bought a longer range system, similarly destructive, from Israel. So those systems they've already had, but I mean, by adding to that capacity, obviously it's a negative development.
2 battalions
that's
is
not,
what we know of Smerch specifically.
That's not been confirmed, and the Armenian government reaction has been, yes, we are aware of those sales, but there's also some disinformation in that list, and they have not showed this new Smerch that they have reportedly acquired. They've showed other systems. So there might be some disconnects between what Vedomosti reported and what actually happened. That's unclear, but certainly that's a problematic there. The overall architecture of this conflict is, as long as Armenia is committed to defending Nagorno-Karabakh, and as long as Russia is committed to defending Armenia, that creates an impossible situation for Azerbaijan. So they're trying to challenge that link by whatever means they can. So by buying all these weapons from Russia, there is a military technical aspect of it, but as long as Russia remains committed to defending Armenia, it is negated. The politically driven aspect of it is they're trying to undermine whatever confidence Armenia has in Russia, and drive the wedge there.
In other words, for Azerbaijan, this is more of a psychological.
It's a multiple. There's multiple things, but psychological comes to the preeminence because, again, coming back to the architecture of the conflict, as long as Russia's committed to defending Armenia and Armenia is committed to defending Nagorno-Karabakh, they don't have an option. They don't have a military option that's attractive. So that's certainly an aspect of deterrence. At the same time, looking at the international security regime, would be a hard sell for Russia to actually say, oh, you know what? We're supporting this balance by arming both sides, giving them an opportunity to kill each other to such an extent that they won't go to war. Because at some point, the current government in Azerbaijan will fall. There'll be another government in Armenia at some point. So there might be other people more radical than the current governments, and they'll be sitting on those arsenals, and they will fire at some point. Maybe even between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but in other conflicts that might be domestic or otherwise. So it's a hard sell. I think Russia is playing, pursuing a policy that can have negative repercussions for its own interests.
And what are those interests?
I think the overall interest, as far as Russia is concerned, is to keep the stability in the Caucasus and make sure that there is not a change in overhaul in the security architecture there, where Western forces, U.S.-supported forces, will come in and take over security responsibility.
Prevent any other presence of any other military.
Yeah. I mean, they are trying to keep at least this extent of influence that they have there, and maybe improve relations with Georgia right now, and change the situation there so that they have the relationship that they're comfortable with, especially as far as North Caucasus is concerned, that there is no spillover into North Caucasus.
Yesterday, a war veteran from Karabakh gave an interview talking about this deal, and basically criticized Russia for doing this, but also mentioning that even if we have similar weaponry from Russia, Russians are bringing it to their own military base that exists in Gyumri. And they're not training the Armenian military to be able to use this. Is this a fair criticism?
Well, depending on what exactly he's speaking about. The notion is, certainly Russia wants to maximize its influence over Armenia. So by selling weapons to Azerbaijan and reinforcing its base in Armenia, they are putting Armenia in more of a dependent position than it was previously. So there is, that's a fair criticism overall. However, there is also direct transfers from Russia to Armenia, and some of the systems we discussed. There have been reports that there also been transferred to Armenian army. So you know, what particularly I think was significant, what Arkady Karapetyan mentioned in that interview, is that, you know, they're sitting in Stepanakert, they're in the fire zone, but
they're the primary target.
Yeah, but the entire Armenia is in the fire zone. I mean, there's not a place in Armenia that cannot be reached from Azerbaijan, and entire Azerbaijan is a fire zone as far as Armenia is concerned. Yes, there are certain places where there's, you know, concentration of military bases and military targets, but both places are a fire zone. It's two small countries. Any conflagration that's extensive is going to have repercussions throughout, and that's what's deterring both sides from going to war.
You agreed that a possibility of renewed military engagement would involve full-scale Armenia and full-scale Azerbaijan next time?
Not necessarily, no. They could. What I'm saying is, if the government in Azerbaijan, which is sort of the one unhappy with the status quo, looks at the situation and thinks, well, we'll go to war with them, but they're thinking, oh, what are going to be the repercussions of it? Yes, we can attack them, we can kill a bunch of them, but they can do the same to us. Will this destabilize our country to an extent that we'll have a crisis? You know, we'll lose power. What if Russia gets involved and comes in and bombs us directly? I mean, it's...
What's the probability of that? Because the 49-year agreement, which while describing the security situation or architecture in the region, you were saying, well, if there's Karabakh-Azerbaijan engagement, then Armenia is going to be engaged, then Russia will have obligations. There's a 49-year agreement between this administration in Armenia and the previous Medvedev administration that was prolonged, where basically for the major change, at least the speculation, not the speculation, but the argument in Armenia was that from now on, Russia actually carries responsibility not only for its own interests, but also Armenia's interests.
Yeah, that's spelled out in the agreement. I mean, again, Armenia and Azerbaijan are small countries. Karabakh is a smaller place still. So the current, de facto, it's you know, it's integrated into Armenia in terms of military, in terms of, you know, everything.
Economically.
Yeah. So there is not a possibility where, and this is the possibility that Azerbaijan would like to create, sort of limit theater of operations to Karabakh, and keep Armenia out, and you know, hopefully reduce the potential for Russian reaction. So they would like to create that, maybe even go for a couple of districts outside of Karabakh that they would. But Armenia's position is, you know, it's not going to be a small engagement, and we'll limit it to that. If we feel that, you know, we need militarily to attack somewhere else, we will, because there, you know, that's, you know, that's the nature of the conflict. So the position that Azerbaijan can attack Karabakh and it would be a local conflagration, I don't think holds water. We can imagine the possibility of certain escalations. For example, Azerbaijan does have a significant superiority in the air, so they can potentially risk sort of low-risk engagements in the air to show that they have military capability to fly over, to bomb maybe something, maybe engage Armenian planes, etc. So that is a possibility. That's probably a higher possibility than on the ground full-scale engagement that would, you know, basically a lot of shells flying in both directions and causing a lot of damage. So there is a number of other levels of escalations that can occur without you know, full-scale conflict. But you know, hopefully that's also a remote possibility, because you can never know when the other side is going to stop. So when you start, and you don't know what the end game will be, because the other side always has a vote.
You mentioned the fact that the Armenian administration, current administration, did not show any political reaction, basically. What should be a possible reaction? Or are there things that the Armenian government could do in order to show a truth, like calling the ambassador back? I don't know, ways that you show.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple. I mean,
What can be done that has not been done, do you believe?
Well, first of all, as a matter of policy, the relationship with other countries, be it Russia or Ukraine or Israel or whatever, needs to significantly factor in issues like arms supplies to Azerbaijan. And this is like 10 years too late, but it's never too late. It's got to be done. There is some hints that start to happen, at least on the back channel level, but back channel level does not have the same type of effect. When you make it a public reaction, when you make a community, for example, the Russian Armenian community, aware of this issue, there's going to be reactions, there's going to be conversations, there's going to be maybe protests in Moscow by a huge Armenian community that's there. We can look at Azerbaijan, on the other hand, has made this a political issue. So whenever there are weapon supplies from Russia to Armenia, or from Ukraine to Armenia, or from Moldova to Armenia, they make protests. And in certain cases, they have been partially, somewhat successful in delaying making the price a little bit higher for militarization of Armenia. A little bit higher. I mean, there's been not a similar policy as far as Armenia is concerned, and without sort of showing that diplomatic wherewithal and making that a consistent policy. Every time there's going to be another news, everybody's upset. But I mean, what are we doing? What is the Armenian government doing about it? I don't think they're doing much in terms of the public.
Well, for the first time, this past December, Serge Sarkisyan made a critical statement at the CSTO summit. What was that about? Do you see a link between this?
Yeah. I mean, there's been some statements. Every once in a while, they've been generally more vague than I would prefer. I think when you speak, it's better to speak more directly. That's the language of modern politics. When the United States is unhappy with Russia sending weapons to Syria, they make that clear. They don't say we don't like countries sending weapons to certain countries. No, they say that they don't like Russia supplying a particular air defense system to Syria or Iran or another country. Or if we look at the Russian government itself, they're unhappy with Ukraine sending weapons, or were unhappy with Ukraine sending weapons to Georgia prior to 2008 war, and they said that clearly. We don't have that clarity on the Armenian government side. I don't understand it.
Is there a way of, for example, showing this concern at the CSTO, saying, I mean, maybe freezing the membership, or I mean, does it really make sense to be in sort of this fake or non-functional organization?
It doesn't really cost Armenia much. It does bring some aspect of additional security layer to Armenia, just like the partnership with NATO does, even though it's on the level of kind of formality mostly. So it just gives Armenia an opportunity to be in a certain forum. I don't think it makes sense to withdraw from that forum, just like it didn't make sense, for example, for Armenia to terminate its partnership for peace cooperation after the situation in Budapest. And that was, a very serious situation when an Armenian officer was killed. It happened on the NATO watch. There's, and who is remembering that year after? Right. It's. I think one of these days, the Armenian government will just resume relations with Hungary and not accomplish anything in the end. I mean, that's my concern.
Last question. Do you think this arms sale can impact the public opinion towards Russians in Armenia? Certainly,
yeah. I mean, it impacts the public opinion because there's this sense that Russia is Armenia's friend, and obviously it's an unfriendly gesture as far as Armenia is concerned. But at the same time, there is this sort of notion of fate. I mean, maybe Armenia is kind of reluctantly is Russian ally because it has a situation it has with Turkey and doesn't have the Western interest, substantial Western interest in providing for security of Armenia. So it's kind of, by default, it's forced to be with Russia in an alliance with Russia. Perhaps it's also the same with Russians. Maybe they'd prefer to have that relationship of an alliance with Azerbaijan rather than with Armenia, because Azerbaijan is geographically positioned in a way that would help the Russians deal with the North Caucasus issues. Has they can have a cartel arrangement regarding the oil. There's a bunch of things that they probably would prefer to do with Azerbaijan rather than with Armenia. So it's, in a way, a reluctant alliance between Armenia and Russia. At the same time, it is an alliance that exists, and it has proven, to a degree, first helped solidify the ceasefire agreement, which is very important. It's almost 20 years old. And second, to continue into the future, Armenia will need an external supporter like Russia, and unless somebody else is willing.
Do you see anybody?
I haven't got any calls from anybody else. So I don't know. I mean, it is a region where Russia plays a preeminent role. The war in Georgia is still the primary lesson that all regional countries have appropriated. That's not a forever situation, but that is the reality of that region. Armenia will have to deal with Russia. Armenia would be better served to be more direct in what it wants from Russia in public statements and otherwise.
To break this ambiguity.
Yes, to be very clear what it is they want, because when you have this sort of weapons transfers and the only reaction you get from the Armenian Defense Ministry is, "Oh, we knew about this long ago." That shouldn't be the reaction of the Armenian Defense Ministry. Armenian Defense Ministry should be very concerned about this.
Thank you, Emil.
You're welcome.
Thanks for talking to us today.